Hello, listeners, and welcome to Teachers Have Issues. Yes, I am your host, Lana the Educator. If you're a first time listener on this channel, welcome. We are currently in season 4. Here, we explore the latest educational trends, tackle pressing issues facing the education sector, and conduct insightful interviews with people making a difference. We also share stories of triumph and innovation from classrooms across the globe. If you're interested in all of this, then like and subscribe. Today, we welcome guest Clive Grant. Clive Grant is an educator with over 28 years of experience in the content areas of mathematics and science. He has taught at the secondary school level in several countries: Jamaica, England, Qatar, Thailand, and the United States of America. He has qualifications from Jamaica, England, and the United States, which range from diplomas, associate degrees, bachelor's, and master's. He has a Bachelor of Art in Combined Studies from the University of Derby and also PGCE in Educational Leadership, Masters of Education from University of the People in the USA. He taught at Lodge Park Academy and Weaver School in North Hampshire in England and Krabi International School in Thailand. We welcome Clive Grant. I'm very much interested to hear, how did you find life in Thailand?
Well, actually, in Thailand, culture had a lot to play in the education there.
Mm-hmm.
What actually happened is that most parents, they see education as a way of empowering their children.
Mm-hmm.
And my observation, and from what I gathered, is that they see it as a means of moving from the Asian culture and going to the Western culture so as to learn from the developed country. The mindset in Asia is that they see the United States, England, and Canada as developed countries, and their expertise in those countries that they would like to implement in their country so that their country can become developed country.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result of that, there's a push by the parent to encourage their children to do well academically. They encourage them to do the British curriculum as well as the American curriculum. And as a result of that, these students will eventually gain qualification to study in the universities in these countries. And as a result of that, coming here into the US, England, or Canada, they will gain the academic ideas, the knowledge, the expertise, the skill, etc., that will empower them so that they can make their country or Asia a country that are an era that is first world in terms of experience. So as far as I'm concerned, they see education as a way of actually trying to become like the Western world and empowering them so they can have certain amount of economic independence.
Nice. So you are a mathematics teacher. Can you tell us about the levels that you teach?
Well, I teach both maths and science, and I teach mainly at the secondary school level.
Mm-hmm.
In the British curriculum, they refer to it as Key Stage 3, 4, and 5.
Mm-hmm.
It would cover mainly like year 7 up to, in the Caribbean, we say like year A levels, we
Mm-hmm.
say year 12 or year 13. For
Mm-hmm.
example, in Jamaica, they would say A level. So I've taught mainly right across the secondary level spectrum and such.
Mm-hmm.
And it involved, as I said, all the sciences: chemistry, biology, physics, and maths.
So how does teaching those two content areas, math and science, in Thailand compare with your experiences because you've taught in England and the United States currently? How does teaching math and science compare with your experiences in the Caribbean?
Okay, what actually happened is that it teaching in Thailand, if one look at the Asian language,
Mm-hmm.
they tend to use a lot of what we call character in their writing, their language per se. They refer to a lot of character.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find happening, using symbols for them is something that they are exposed to. So using the mathematical symbols, or teaching chemistry with the different symbols,
Right.
they are able to relate to it. So it's not that ambiguous to them per se.
Mm-hmm.
So you find that there's a greater inclination or aligning to use these things. So teaching science in Thailand wasn't a challenge, and math wasn't a challenge per se, because they could relate to it from an experiential point of view.
Mm.
But you find that probably in the US, also I taught in Qatar
All right.
and England, there's because the fundamental thing, education is not seen as a vehicular way of upward mobility.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be a bit more challenge in teaching in science and maths in those areas or in those countries.
Mm-hmm.
But in Thailand, it was a pleasure. As I said to person, while in Thailand, I've taught there for 4.5 years, and
Mm-hmm.
I never saw a fight in a school. Never had a fight
Wow.
there.
Mm-hmm.
So it tells you what it's like. There's gregariousness about the student there. They work together, even if they are from different countries, whether they're from China, South Korea, Japan, India, etc. They see it a way of mobilizing their part of the world, Asia, to
Mm-hmm.
become first world. So therefore, it empower them and encourage them to have a progressive mindset.
Mm. So, what motivated you to leave the Caribbean? Were you teaching in the Caribbean before you decided to move and go to England, USA, Thailand, Qatar? What motivated you to make that move?
I always believe that there's no boundary to the impact you can have in this world as it relates to your professional influence per se.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, to develop a matter of fact, I'm one of those person who believe in the progressive philosophy. Also, I am one of those person who believe in being pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, I believe to progress and to become a better person professionally and personally, it is good for one to learn from others.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching and learning is a lifelong experience. And by sharing with others and learning from others in different cultures, it makes a professor or a teacher become what I term as a value added teacher. In that it adds value to your teaching, you're able to gain from others, they are able to share with others. And probably in my latter part of my career, I would probably like to move back to my country and help to share some of the things that I've learned from a policymaker point of view, be like a consultant to,
Mm-hmm.
empower my country so that Jamaica can actually become a first world in terms of its educational policies, its standard, etc. So it's like going to these countries, it enabled me to have a wider view of education, look at the cultural implication, look at what are the motivating factors that allow these countries to have whether the positive side of the educational system, and see how best I can take some of these ideas to help my country to become economically viable and into that. In fact, I like any good citizen would. I would like my country, Jamaica, and any other country to become, independent in the sense of independent, not have to depend on others per se, and have that empowerment to achieve their full potential. So, I decided to explore all these countries to become a better person.
Mm. So, take us back to the first time that you migrated from Jamaica. What were the steps you take to get into teaching abroad? What was your first posting per se, and what means did you use? Was it a recruitment, or did you just go yourself and look at things online and kind of sort yourself out? What was it like for you that first time around?
Well, actually, what I did was it was a bit ironic in that I was in Jamaica at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I had initially at that time I had my associate degree.
Mm-hmm.
But then I did some research and realized that in England they wanted a diploma. In the
Mm-hmm.
Caribbean, diploma is seen as a lesser qualification
Mm-hmm.
than a degree. But in England, because of the colonial system per se, diploma somewhat more aligned with England. So while I was teaching in Jamaica, I decided to go back to college and I did my teacher diploma.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to England, it was one of the main qualifications that allowed me to, get the chance to go to England. So when I went to England, I started teaching science and math.
Mm.
And while there, I realized that I'm not there just to make money per se, but I also saw the opportunity of going there and also do my first degree. So
Mm.
while I was teaching there, I studied my undergraduate, my first degree, my bachelor's there, mainly in science and psychology while I
Mm.
was in the United Kingdom.
Mm.
So, it was a means of empowering me both from a professional as well as a personal level.
So did you apply online or did you go to recruitment fairs? Did you do things yourself? How did you get from the Caribbean to England?
I went online and I did my application. A
Okay.
matter of fact, all the job that I've earned internationally, I just decided to go on the internet, look at, for example, I went on, you have what is called e-teach, you
Mm-hmm.
have what is called test. I
Mm-hmm.
went on those websites and I just directly applied to the school and just did the interview. And once I did the interview, that was it because I'm one person like this. I believe in myself.
Mm-hmm.
And once you decide to interview me, rest assured about it that I almost say myself 90% of that is it. The job is mine because when I'm doing an interview,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm finished, you have no choice but to employ me because I believe in value added teacher. I'm one of those persons. I'm very pragmatic, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in teaching using a method that is called KISS, KISS, which is
Mm-hmm.
a keep it simple smartly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that there's no limit to the power of our brain. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, it's just for us to just believe in ourselves, motivate, and being from the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
we are generally industrious, hardworking. We are not deterred by challenges per se. So like going to England, the temperature would be the winter, etc. Winter challenge, going to Qatar,
Mm-hmm.
Muslim culture. We are from the Caribbean, which is usually Christian oriented.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole issue about it is that once you're motivated, once you have a goal in mind, and once you plan to have an impact on humanity, because earlier I wanted to become a doctor, but then
Right.
because I love people, I love
Mm-hmm.
people. I am somewhat a unselfish person. I'm very passionate about what I do. But then I realized that, I was so much concerned about persons, and they advised me that it would not be a good idea for me to go into medical because I may have a reaction in that I become too caught up with the suffering of my patients. So I said, well, then the best thing for me next to do is to go into teaching where I can impact on person's life. And generally, I like to teach in school that the students are often looked upon as underachievers. I like to teach in school where students are from this low socioeconomic spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
status of life, because I want to empower them. So, it's a joy for me to see when students that, if I should use the English alphabet as a parable or as an example here, is like moving them from Z to A. That's a great achievement for me.
Mm-hmm. So have you faced any challenges, as somebody from the Caribbean and teaching in different countries? What challenges or obstacles have you encountered along the way?
Well, you'll always experience challenge in whichever culture you go because cultural differences. But what is important is the growth mindset that one has. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, like when I went to England, the issue had what like climate standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So there was evidence of like racism, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter to me because once you know what you're about, um, when I went to Qatar, you could still see some evidence of colonialism
Mm-hmm.
in that they saw persons coming from England and the first world as somewhat as if they were better citizens than those that were coming from the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that startled me, for example, teaching in Qatar, is that they knew about Jamaica and the tendency about Jamaican. There was the stigma about weed. I was a bit shocked because as a Muslim country, I never expect them to talk about weed and things like that because that was something that was a fearful thing in the country because you could end up losing your life.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had students having that discussion and asking me about it, but I never entertain it, and but as a Jamaican, that's something I had to deal with. And also the media in my country, they tend to portray a lot of negative things having to do with like gang violence, war,
Mm-hmm.
etc. So when I went to England, they all saw that okay, I was from like a ghetto era.
Mm-hmm.
They saw that every Jamaican were smokers of marijuana, ganja, and then they could not believe that I don't smoke, I don't drink alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
All those things was a bit surprising to them. So all of those stigma that I had to eventually, if I may say, live above, so as to show them that there's a positive side to us in the Caribbean. But it was a good experience for me because I saw myself as ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
Because whatever I'm doing for my future Jamaican as well as Caribbean. So, as I said, it had its challenges, but we have to live above it and keep on progress.
Was there a language barrier in countries like Thailand or so forth, or even in terms of accent that you would have had to handle? How did you handle that if it came up?
Well, the language barrier manifests itself mainly in Thailand as well as in Qatar, because in
Mm-hmm.
Qatar they speak mainly Arabic and in Thailand they speak what is called Thai.
Mm-hmm.
So to overcome that, we have to use a lot of image. So you picture, so if you're buying something or you're talking to someone, you would probably show them an image of it on your phone. So you'd like to overcome the language barrier, you had to use a lot of image.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that especially earlier, especially when I was teaching in England, because
Mm-hmm.
there were some a lot of Polish students
Mm-hmm.
who were in England. And to teach those students science and math, we have to use a lot of imagery. So image, was a vital thing in overcoming the language barrier in those countries.
Mm-hmm. I remember you saying a little earlier that you wanted to be a doctor at first, but you are a teacher here. Was and not just a teacher, but a mathematics teacher. Was that something that was intentional to after you found that you didn't want to be um into medicine anymore? Was it intentional choosing mathematics as your content area?
Yes, children matter and time my content area, and it goes back to what a child is exposed to during
Mm,
the childhood had a great impact or influence on what they become in the
mm-hmm,
future. As a Jamaican, I like sport, I like games,
mm-hmm.
and I used to play a game that was called Domino that involved numbers.
Yeah, right.
And as a result of that, I was able to, we use the term in Jamaica, read the game. You could look at, determine what it was in somebody's hand, what it is. So you actually kind of critically think about how you could beat your opponent.
Mm,
And then if the person has a domino that you wanted for them to put on the board, you play a certain pattern a certain way. So I find that logical thinking from early then. Also, when I was in my early teens and at secondary school, year seven, I used to read a lot of mystery books. I remember the Hardy Boy, the Nancy Drew, the Bob the Twin. I used to read a lot of those books, those
mm,
mystery books.
mm,
So it's like I developed this inclination to analyze things, look for evidence, read, before things happen. It was like forensic. So it's like I look for evidence, look for pattern, and also see where smoke screen would appear. So it's like this whole logical thinking,
mm-hmm.
this critical thinking, that innovative mind all came from my childhood years when I used to be involved in sport, involved in games, and reading those mystery books.
Mm. So how has teaching in these various countries, enriched what you think about education, how you view education?
Well, I realized that teaching in various countries, they have different, if I may say, aspect of education that they tend to highlight.
Mm,
For example, one of the distinction I made, for example, when I was teaching in Qatar, I taught at Blight Canadian Academy. And I realized that the way of approach to teaching would be something that I would call like a microwave approach,
Mm.
wherein you'll be given the answer per se, but then you have to prove or show how you get that answer. So it's like you were coming from the inside out. So you get the answer, then you have to work or prove how the answer, why that answer, that answer. So I call it a microwave approach, where you
Mm.
come from inside out.
Mm.
Whereas for me, the British curriculum is more like the opposite. You come from out in. You are given the question and then you work it till you get the solution.
Mm.
So for me, I see that different culture have it different approach. One will give you the solution, you show how you get the solution, while another will give you the problem and then you have to try to solve it to get the solution. So, those were two things that I pick up in terms of my experiences so far overseas, comparing the British curriculum, the Canadian curriculum, and I believe the American curriculum is somewhat a hybrid of both,
Mhm.
wherein they tend to put those approaches together, especially in this technological age.
Mhm. So, are there any specific aspects of the Caribbean education system that you feel other countries could benefit from, especially in math?
Well, I think one other thing about teaching in the Caribbean, you're allowed to, if I may say, use your experiential experience, like being on the outside, interacting with things, somewhat seeing math at work. I believe in most of these first world countries, students are not given a chance to see math alive. It's
Mm.
like they actually just sit in a classroom and they're actually doing the question. But there's no the practical application. That is why when I'm teaching math now, I have to make it relevant to experience that the student may have. So, for example, if I'm teaching something in algebra, let me say, for example, 3x plus y, I would have to let them know that, okay, when they go to Walmart here in the US, you see three small boxes of oranges here, or you
Mhm.
see a large box of oranges. That is a quadratic equation that is being presented there. And the owner of the store or the management will determine, okay, by selling three boxes of that plus one box of that, I make such amount of money, it equal this amount of money. And I also let them realize that, like, even working, when they work a certain amount of time in at a particular place, they get a certain amount of money. So therefore, the amount of time they spend, time the money will give them the solution. So it's like, for me, I think in the Caribbean, you are given the chance to explore much more in your everyday life. Because I can recall as a little boy, I used to pick lime in Jamaica,
Mhm.
and we had to count them. So you
Yeah.
like when you pick 12, you say a dozen. When you pick another 12, 2 dozen. So like
Right.
those things was able to help us as it relate to understanding the concept of math. And I have to try to do the same thing now so that my student can able to relate to it, in a practical sense.
Mm. So, what advice would you give to other Caribbean teachers in whatever content area, if they're considering international teaching?
Yeah, we, you will always have challenges wherever you go,
Mm.
but the positive will always outweigh the negative. The
Mm.
benefit will always outweigh the setback that one may experience overseas.
Mm.
And if you have a growth mindset, you will find out that it's gonna make you better. One thing I always encourage teachers going overseas to also do, when you're teaching in any country, it's advisable that you do some form of studying while there. For example, whether it be a short course or some degree, etc.
Mm.
It empowered you, it gives you more current information, it enables you to be empowered, it actually allow you to have a wider view of the world. So it like I'm able to get like a telescope view. I'm
Mm.
able to see outside of the box more than just looking at what is in front of me. So therefore, it enabled me to be a better citizen of my country and of the world and become more like a global citizen. So my advice to anyone planning on going overseas to teach, go for it. yes, you will have to make certain sacrifice. There are certain things that, but you have to come out of your comfort zone.
Mm.
The comfort zone. And there's this analogy that is being used that if you want to find pearl at the bottom of the sea, you have to leave the land
Mm.
and go to the bottom of the shore. So therefore, for me, I see that as that experience. And there's so much richness out there because even going back to Thailand, I've never had so much fresh food and fresh fruit in all my life.
Right.
And I believe I've ate so much fresh food and fresh fruit in Thailand
Mm-hmm.
that had been a health and medicine to me.
Mm-hmm.
Every day in Thailand, for example, you could go to market. 7 days of the week, there was market there. So every day you could get something fresh to eat. And I think from a health standpoint, it has been great for me because I'm happy to say that I've not been sick over 40 odd years. I've not been to the doctor for any form of illness.
Right.
And I think it had to do with that type of experience going overseas, expose myself to positive influences, eating right over there, and just do that which is right. So it had its wealth of experience. And as far as I'm concerned, wherever you go in life, it may be like a desert, but there's always oases in those desert
Right.
wherein you would have rich experience, refreshing experience that revitalize your professional as well as your personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And the benefit outweigh the negative part. And the ultimate thing is that when you leave these countries or these culture, you become a better individual. You are able to give more back to your native island, and there's a peace and joy and happiness of exploring different culture. You have a wide experience. You are able to see, especially if you love nature.
Yeah.
You're given a chance to see nature at all its beauty. Because I recall, for example, when I went to Thailand and I saw so many different islands,
Mm-hmm.
it somewhat remind me of some of the things that I've read in books such as the Bible and things like those. So it's a wonderful experience. You see plants and animals. You see people. Even as a little boy growing up, I used to watch a lot of what we call kung fu movie, karate,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like being into Asia. It's like I was actually seeing those persons in real life. So it wasn't just like looking at digital or some fantasy or visual thing. It
Mm-hmm.
was reality that I was no experiencing. So going overseas, it had a lot of rich experience. And sometimes what you read in the books or what you see on TV, when you go into this country, you realize that sometimes it's totally different from what is being portrayed here.
Right.
Because even going to the Middle East, I got the impression that this place was a place wherein you have to walk on the white line. You have to be fearful. But
Right.
then when I went to Qatar, for example, it was the place the most, I would say, the most crime-free area I've ever lived. I felt so comfortable there. I could open my door. I don't have to worry about anything. I could leave my phone, my money, anything like that, and not fearful. So it's like, going somewhere. A matter of fact, by going overseas, it remove a lot of the stigma that sometimes you have about a particular culture.
Right.
Well, I think because education is dynamic, as teachers, depending if you are not having a growth mindset, you'll find that it can be a challenge if you are not adaptable or flexible to the various teaching ethos or culture within certain school or within a certain country. So you find that, especially in an age like this, wherein a lot of emphasis is being placed on technology, digital per se, a lot of online things being done, you find that the focus has moved from what was termed as a teacher-centered classroom to said to be more student-centered classroom. Previously, classroom was expected to be a place where students sat and were there working quietly, and you tend to find that being encouraged in the Caribbean a lot. But then when you go overseas, you find that the classroom tend to be a bit more noisy or a bit more student voices being heard. There's an emphasis in these countries to use what is called station, where students are being placed in generally, let me say groups of 4, and they are asked now to do activities. So you'll find, for example, you may have a teacher-led station where teacher will sit with a student who may seem to be a bit weaker in a particular topic that is being taught, while other students will that are able to understand or function effectively, they may be placed at a station where they actually do the work. For varieties, some activity will be done using technology, some will be using non-technology approach, and then the students are allowed to rotate or move from the different station within a particular lesson. But it's just that you'll find that you may hear a bit more noise in the classroom. And for those of us as teachers who believe that teaching classroom control means that there should be no noise, then that can become an issue.
Right.
Because the student will be making noise, they will be sharing their idea, they will be collaborating. So that could be an issue. And sometimes in those stations, it calls for, let me say, greater teacher supervision to an extent, in that you have to be looking at the different table or different station to ensure that students are actually doing or completing the task. So it gives more student autonomy, but then sometimes they may not be responsible as you want them to be. So therefore, as teacher, you have to be moving around and be keen on that aspect of it. But you have less of teacher voice per se, and that I think would be a good thing, that you have less stress on your vocals. So from that standpoint, that's a positive for the teacher.
Yeah. So what determines for you personally where you teach? What is that final determining factor for you in terms of both country and the schools that you choose?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm one of those persons who believe in value-added teacher,
Mhm.
and because I'm of the view I want to make an impact on persons. I love to help the vulnerable persons and the vulnerable people. I generally like to teach in a school or work with students who are seen as outcasts, who are
Mhm.
seen as non-achievers,
Mhm.
persons who will be viewed as, the lowest in the society.
Mhm.
So generally I have an inclination to teach in school where I can empower students, because as someone who believes in the progressive philosophy, I want to progress or encourage my learners to have value on themselves. And it's, as I said, my part of my personality, I'm very competitive. I like sport a lot. I like game.
Right.
And as a result of that, to become a winner, you have to persevere. You have to have the growth mindset. You have to strategize and basically have dream. So for me, I think that the way I go to teach other teacher is usually influenced by the way society look at that school or those students.
Mhm.
I want to go to place where persons are looked as outcasts and help those persons to become worthwhile citizens of their countries and also of the world.
Mhm. Nice. I know that you said you you didn't see any fighting in Thailand or so forth, but I know you've worked in other places. Besides that, have you seen or faced any behavioral challenges or differences in what is expected of students abroad?
Well, what actually happened, there's if I may put it, an inborn inclination, desire for each one to see themselves as better than the other person. So you find that there's a level of competition that sometimes would want to manifest itself. But then, apart from teaching science and math, I'm also involved in sport in the school. For example, I coach a soccer team in all the countries I've been to. I've been a part of the coaching of a soccer team.
Mhm.
So I bring that also into the classroom and let my students realize that soccer, for example, is a team sport.
Mhm.
And if the goalkeeper or the midfielder or the defender or the attacker do not play their part effectively, the team will lose. So even if you are the forward decide to score all the goals and
Mhm.
you believe that you are more important than the defender, if the defender don't defend good, then the other team will score probably more goals than you have scored. So collectively, you have to work together to achieve a common goal.
Nice.
So, you know, yes, you'll find that there's a human inclination to be selfish,
Mhm.
but as an educator, as a teacher, I try to redirect my students and realize that together they achieve. And I bring them to the reality that if you are in a community and you have 10 students that is in my class, for example, and nine of you go, and there are 10 of you in the class, and nine of those students eventually become great achievers, and one does not, and you
Mhm.
are living in the same community, that one person gonna become jealous of you guys.
Mhm.
And as a result of that, rest assured you could have trouble in that community because of that one student.
Yeah.
So the most important thing is that to ensure that I ensure that everyone become achievers in some way, form, so that the all 10 students can become, achievers. And as a result of that, they will have a harmonious community. So
Mhm.
it's all about collectively we achieve.
Mhm. I know you talked about continually improving yourself. So are there any specific professional development opportunities that you found valuable in your host countries that you've been to?
Yes. For example, when I was in the UK, as I said to you, I did my bachelor degree. I wanted to, experience what it was like to be taught in a English university, what
Mhm.
approach they use there, and as a result of that, I got an insight of how they view things, how the mark scheme was like.
Mhm.
Um, what I find, for example, in the US, they tend to use a lot of in marking their work. They would sit and use a lot of Rubik
Mhm.
to grade. So you find the American system, you have a lot of Rubik that is being used,
Mhm.
whereas in the English system, you find that there would be more like a certain level of mark scheme
All right.
that was not more in a Rubik form as
Okay.
compared to the US per se.
Mhm.
So those are two things that I noted different. As I said, in Qatar, there was an inclination to copy from the first world countries,
Mhm.
and likewise in Thailand, they would. Well, in Thailand, they were a bit more inclined to the British system per se. ten
So they
percent
do,
of
they
them
do
would.
A levels there as well still? GC?
Y- Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. They do A level there but they call it back there year 12 and year 13. They didn't use
Okay.
the term A level, so it's like secondary school would be typical like in the Caribbean. Let me say from 7 to 11,
Mhm.
and then when you reach 12 and 13, they call it key stage 5.
Okay.
So key stage 3 would be from year 7 to 9. Key stage 4 would be at 10 and 11, and then key stage 5 would be like year 12 and 13.
In Thailand, do they have to sit like we have the common entrance exam or the secondary entrance exam, or is it just a moving forward to like in the US, you might move from elementary school to high school? Is there a determinant exam that they have to sit?
Well, in the international school,
Mm.
you do not really have to sit an exam per se to enter those schools.
because they move.
But it's usually the affluent, the rich persons that tend to
Mm.
afford the salary that is being paid to go to these schools.
Mhm.
But in the other typical Thai school, you have some form of exam that need to be done, but it is not as rigorous in the Caribbean where you have to, for example, in Jamaica, they have changed over the many years. They have moved from what was called GSAT and Common Entrance to PEP.
Mm.
They have so many different, but to move from primary to secondary stage, whereas in the Caribbean, you have to do, I'm speaking from my experience in Jamaica, you have to do an exam before you're able to move on to a next school per se.
Right.
Um, in Thailand and all, it's not like that. You
Right.
don't have to, but it's just that at each stage there's some form of testing that is being done, some form of assessment to assess where you are, so that when you move to the next stage, the school can look at what are your strengths and what are your weakness per se.
Mm. So, is there any interesting, or are there any interesting resources or technology that you've encountered across the various countries that you've worked in that specifically they're using in mathematics and science now that probably we can benefit from in the Caribbean or that you found interesting?
Okay, I think one of the tools that have been experienced in teaching math, for example, is
Mm.
what is called IXL.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think it's a very
Yes, I'm familiar with it. Really, really a good resource. Yes.
yeah, it's a good resource that I would encourage parents as well as school
Mhm.
to explore. The beauty about it, it covers, let me say, from primary to secondary
Mhm.
level.
Mhm.
So I think it's a good tool that can be used. Also, from a science perspective, there's one that is called
Mhm. Mhm.
Discovery Learning. It's
Mhm.
a good tool that can also help with learning.
Mhm.
You have what is called quizzes,
Right.
and
No quizzes. Yeah.
yeah, that's a good one that also can help with science.
Mm.
And also, you have what is called Nearpod.
Right.
It lends itself to literature oriented, but can you for reading the content area, thing like those. So biology, for example.
Mm.
So I think those are, good tool that can be used to complement,
Mm.
let me say the course book or the text that are being used for a particular subject.
Mm. Mm. Have you guys, how is the exams that you're doing, are they traditional pen and paper exams or have they moved more towards digital type of sitting exams, online exams and that sort of thing? I know the SAT has gone online as well there. So what are the exams like?
In Thailand, the traditional exam wherein the question booklet eventually came from England. The student, they were being locked away in a vault under tight security. You had an examiner that had to
Yeah.
open those. Yeah, it was very strict. A matter of fact, you also have like someone that link with Cambridge because in Asia they normally do the Cambridge exam. So you find that there was a person that would come from England
Mhm.
there to oversee that okay all the examination requirement was being met from time to time. So it was traditional. It wasn't online that was being done.
Okay.
Yeah, but in America, they encourage at the middle school, for example, where I am, they encourage a lot of online teaching, online assessment.
Mhm. So what do you miss about teaching in your home country?
I think in Jamaica, well, my experience going to different countries have been varied, but I think in Jamaica, you find that teachers are somewhat a little bit more, yeah, I mean, respected a bit more. I do not know what it's like now.
Mm.
I've not been in Jamaica for 7 years now.
Mhm.
But while I was there, teachers, you were looked upon as someone who was respected.
Mhm.
You were someone who have a lot of knowledge. You were more revered
Mhm.
in Jamaica per se. But when you go overseas, sometimes especially coming from overseas to teach in other countries, sometimes the students are of the mindset, and sometimes even your colleagues that are there may have the mindset that you're only there for the money.
Mhm.
So because of that, sometimes they do not view you in a light that you are there to probably contribute to them positively, but then you have to make that known to them by the way you go about your having a holistic approach in your teaching. You go about it that way, and as a result of that, you can overcome any form of stigma that you are there just to make money.
Yeah, because I think you described it a bit earlier on that you suddenly sort of become an ambassador for your country because you have to dispel a lot of stereotypes on both ends. Talking about what they thought of Jamaica and Jamaicans and what you might have thought, for example, in Qatar that you spoke about. So I think that that's a good piece of commentary you made in letting people know that sometimes people have stereotypes that you really have to, you know, kind of use your professionalism and your work ethic to sort of overcome there.
Yeah, that's it. That's true. It's like a two-way street, dual purpose. You learn from others and others learn from you.
Mhm. So what stood out to you about Thailand, not just in the education system, but just in the country itself, besides the fruits? I know you spoke about that and the island and the beauty of that. Anything else culturally? Do they have any comparative, if you want to say, aspects that we can say matches the Caribbean, like maybe a carnival or cultural show? Anything that brought back the same memory of home when you were in Thailand?
Yes, it's interesting that you mentioned about festival. They have a lot of festival
Hmm.
in Thailand. They have one that they call Songkran.
Hmm.
It had to do with usually done in April, around the 13th to the 5th, about 3 day celebration. Which had to do with water.
Hmm.
There's next one. There's so many there. There's several festival that had to do with showing respect to family, to teachers, and it's such a rich experience. And what I love about Thailand is that a lot of festival that was being done, it was so rich.
Nice. And did you get an opportunity to share your culture while working there?
Yeah, I did. As a Jamaican, they wanted to know a bit more about reggae music,
Mm-hmm.
um, the sports side of us as Jamaican, where we're fast runners per se.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, my son was the only, if I may put it, African descendant in that particular school.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always the fastest student in the school. He was the strongest one. So it's like they were able to, from a first-hand experience, whenever we go to the barber shop, it was more like a challenge to trim our hair because our hair was not like the typical type person per se.
Mm-hmm.
But they saw it very fascinating. They always want to touch his hair, to feel his hair, this texture. So it's so I said like it was a rich experience, and it's somewhere. Well, when I challenge we also had was that it was 12 hours ahead of Jamaica. So when it was like midnight in Jamaica, it was midday in Thailand. So it was a communication issue like with family back home.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as I said, you have to be adaptable, flexible, and the positive outweigh the negative. So for me, Thailand, the culture, the festival was rich. They allow you to be a part of it. They would take time to teach you how to do the different discipline. And one thing I can tell you about Thailand, those people, they're amazing with light. I see they use light and do so many creative things. It just and
Light?
yeah, light.
Oh, like
They
fireworks?
not only firework, but they would use light and create in all different form. I can tell you, go there, you see some the way they were very creative with light. They would let me say for example, you may go in a building and they would probably use light to create like a heart or
Oh.
a lungs or a kidney or something like that. It was just amazing the way the people could use light, the bulb connect them and put them a certain way. It was, it had a periodic effect on one. It
Mm-hmm.
was such a rich experience,
Mm-hmm.
and if you want to experience health and be healthy, I think Thailand is one of those countries one would like to go.
Why is that? What did they do? What is the lifestyle like?
It's very simple.
Mhm.
I think they do not stress themselves like how we tend to stress ourselves in the Caribbean, like we want to achieve this, that, etc.
Mhm.
I know typically, for example, in Jamaica, we want to have like a big house, big car. We want to have a house filled with furniture, etc. In those places, they are not so concerned about those things. I mean, in a typical home, for example, they would just have like a sheet or a mattress that would be laid on the floor.
Mhm.
When they eat, they tend not to eat like, let me say, around table. They would sit on the floor, spread a mat, and just simplicity, you
Mhm.
know. And most of those houses still have a car, they still have van and things like those, and they were rich, but at the same time they didn't show their wealth from a materialistic way.
Okay.
Yeah, so for me that was one of the eye opening, that you don't have to display your wealth
Mm.
for all to see that, okay, I have a big house, I have a big car, and I have all the big furniture inside here. You don't have to show.
Yeah. And what about the diet? How did you adapt? I know you said the fruits, which would be common probably, but unfamiliar. But what about the diet? How did you adapt to that?
Well, being a vegetarian, it wasn't a challenge for me because all the fruit and vegetable were available. But if
Mhm.
you're a person who is basically like a meat eater, you don't have no worries because you get all the food that you want. And also they have different food that they call exotic that I would not eat, probably from the Caribbean. So if one person want to explore exotic food, then rest
Mm.
assured you'll have that. For example, I've been with colleagues, we have gone out at the end of a week at school, like on a Friday, we would gather at the beach side or at some restaurant. Some of those weird things that we'll never eat in the Caribbean, they eat it over that side.
Oh, what was you worked at an international school. What's that experience been like for you, always in the onboarding process, the USA and England and then Thailand? What's that kind of initial starting period like for you?
Well, as someone who taught in England and also in Qatar before, and before I went to Thailand, I've worked with over 70 different nationalities. I've taught over 100 different nationality in terms of students. It wasn't much of a challenge for me to fit in Thailand. However, I was the only, for me to say, black teacher in that school,
Mm.
and as a result of that, it's as if there was this inclination that I would have to be like others. Not necessarily, I'm one of them person. I don't compete with others. I just be myself because ultimately I believe that all of us have our strength, our weakness. But sometimes there's this stigma that's attached that, you know, black persons are not as educated as persons that are from different ethnic background. So while
Mm.
there, you know, it's as if you were being proven or being tested.
Mm.
But I'm happy that I was the only teacher in that school that was able to teach three different subjects. Was able to
Mm.
teach chemistry, bio, physics, which most persons would say, hey, those are the really hard subjects. So
Mm.
I was able to teach those three subjects at the time along with math. Also, I was able to teach it at key stage 3, 4, and 5.
Mm.
Also, whenever the exam result came out, I was the teacher who got the most passes.
Okay.
So it's like, and it wasn't a case where they were getting just C, they were getting A and B. So it's
Mm.
like, you know, you were being put to the test, but to God be the glory. I always come through and leaving there. Even
Mm.
though I have students who contact me from Thailand and the last batch of student I had. One of my students, she got scholarship to study in Romania to become a doctor.
Mm.
One of the guy, he got a scholarship to study in Netherlands to become a chemical engineer. He's thinking about going into Formula One
Mm.
and engineering per se. Matter of fact, it was because of discussion that we had in our science class. He got that inclination because I like Formula One also. So we used to talk a lot after the race.
Right.
And one of the male, he's now studying to become like a bank manager. And one of the females, she's now studying in British Columbia, Canada, because she wanted to become a psychologist and an educator. So she was following my footsteps. So it's like, you know, being an educator, one just have to do what they have to do. Do not worry about the way society may see you or view you. Just believe in yourself, do what you have to do, and then when you look at that person in the mirror, when you look at yourself in the mirror, then you can know, listen, I've done my best, and if I may put it in a simple way, you have paid your due to humanity.
Mm. Mm. And on that note, I want to thank Clive Grant so much for joining us on the podcast here. I'm Lana, the educator. I want my listeners to know that you empower minds and you ignite curiosity.